Hey everybody, this is Rycard here, back from a really long absence, which I apologize about, but I am here today to basically bring you a video about, or discussing the team that I used to play through Pokemon White, which is what I got last Friday, and have been playing since, because I didn't actually own the game for the longest time. So this is not a competitive set thing by any means, it's more or less just a fun video to show you guys what I used to play through the game, because I know I've gotten a bunch of comments in the past about what Pokemon I use and things like that. So just keep in mind that this team isn't exactly the best team in the world, it's just the team that I picked to play with throughout the game, and just a bunch of different Pokemon that I wanted to use even if they're not necessarily the most powerful things in the world or the best to use in a playthrough. But without further introduction, we're going to start this off with my starter Pokemon, which I picked to be Tepig, which eventually became the EMBOAR you're about to see. So as you can see right now, the starter Pokemon that I picked through my playthrough was EMBOAR, and I picked it mainly because I thought it was the coolest looking out of the three of them, mainly because I've heard a lot of people compare it to like Ganondorf or something like that, and I love Zelda, so I'm like, yeah, I might as well pick the pig, because it also I thought was the cutest in its original form as to pig. But as you're going to see with these videos, I actually did not bother to EV train, mainly because I didn't even care as I was playing through. I just was mainly concerned with having a good time and just enjoying the experience with the Pokemon I wanted to pick. But as you can see, the nature that I was stuck with EMBOAR was a relaxed nature, which is probably one of the worst things you can have on him, because he's so slow to begin with that having any nature that's minus speed really sucks. And there were a lot of cases during this playthrough where I would boost up with Flame Charge and still not outspeed things that I should have been able to outspeed, but due to the lack of speed from the relaxed nature, I kind of got screwed over, which did make this a bit difficult and kind of made me not use EMBOAR as much as I would have initially thought I would. But he still was, relatively the same level as everything else in my party. Obviously, the ability Blaze, which came in handy every now and then, especially when I would boost up with Flame Charge and take damage and then be in Blaze range to keep attacking with my Fire-type moves, making them even more powerful, which is always great. But the other moves that I picked for him were Brick Break, obviously, as his main physical fighting type stab attack, Grass Knot, just in case I would have to end up using him to deal with any water types or rock types that would come about, even though the only rock type that you really ever encounter in the game is like Roggenrola and its evolutions, which all have Sturdy anyways, so even if you do have Grass Knot, it's not going to kill it in one shot, which is always a bummer. But and then obviously I had Flamethrower as my last move, which normally, wouldn't be the thing to have on an EMBOAR because it's mainly a physical attacker, though it does have some pretty good special attack, and I'm a big fan of mixed attackers, so Grass Knot and Flamethrower worked even though it's mainly a physical attacker. But EMBOAR definitely helped me out a lot through this playthrough, and Flame Charge is probably the best move to use in any playthrough of this game, mainly because it makes him very fast eventually if you can get a couple boosts, and at the same time it'll make use of his great attack power, which he normally doesn't have the chance to use in competitive battles unless he's scarfed, because he is naturally slow. Up next we have my SIMISAGE, which I have to say was probably the MVP of this entire team, mainly because of the fact that it was always really fast and always dealt out quite a lot of damage from the physical side, which is pretty much what these monkeys are meant to do. They're fast and they are powerful, and that's what they're really good at. Even though there are other Pokemon that can, say, do their job better, they still are very good at what they do, and I honestly knew that they weren't the best things in the world, but Simisage definitely impressed me a lot in my playthrough, and he probably, under more circumstances than not, surprised me a heck of a lot when he survived hits that I would have never expected it to survive, and also dealt more damage than I could have ever asked for. It pretty much single-handedly took out Ghetsis' team after the Elite Four, which I thought was, amazing, and I would not have expected that to happen initially. But when I got him, He did have a careful nature, which is the plus special defense and minus special attack nature, which isn't terrible on a SIMISAGE because if you just pick one attacking side, which I did because I knew careful lowered special attack, I just made him physical. So that worked out, even though I would have liked to use some special attack moves on him, but it's not the biggest problem in the world. And the special defense did come in handy every now and then. I did end up surviving a couple special hits that I would have not thought about living ever, but it does help every now and then to have a little bit more defense than attack. But as for the ability, we had Gluttony because you can't have anything else with it since the Dream World hasn't released this yet and it was just a playthrough. And for my moves, I picked Seed Bomb as its main stab, Brick Break again as another really good fighting move, Acrobatics, which was also fantastic against any fighting type pokes that I came up against because they were very common in the playthrough. Like, there are so many fighting type things, like you always run into like a Timber or a Girder somewhere along the line, and against the Elite Four guy that uses fighting types, or Acrobatics definitely came in handy a lot. And then obviously Shadow Claw was its last move, which was great because it rounded out its moveset very nicely and allowed it to do super effective damage on a lot of different things in this game. And that's always what you really need to have when you're doing a playthrough because, you need to just deal damage. It's not like something where you can really stall out pokes as you would do maybe in competitive battling. But also I did have the move Cut on it as its HM because I don't know why, I just picked this Pokemon to use it. But it obviously, Cut's useful every now and then, even though you don't technically need it in the playthrough. But as I said before, SIMISAGE was definitely the highlight and the MVP of my entire team throughout this playthrough. Next, we have my MUSHARNA, which I have to say was probably the second most amazing Pokemon on my team. It was, or to what SIMISAGE was to attacks, this thing was to defense. Basically, it was taking hits left and right from every single thing out there. It basically was the go-to Pokemon whenever I needed something to take a hit, because MUSHARNA is very bulky naturally, and the fact that I got a plus defense nature also helped out a lot because it meant physical attacks were doing less damage than they normally would. Also, its psychic typing is very good because, as I said before, there are a lot of fighting types that you run into, and so MUSHARNA is a great switch-in against those Pokemon. But the only thing I could say bad about this MUSHARNA was the fact that its lax nature also decreased its special defense, which, is kind of bad, but it does have naturally high special defense anyways, and I did have Calm Mind on it to kind of offset this anyways, so it wasn't too big of a deal, but it would have been nice if maybe I could have gotten like a plus defense minus attack nature or something, but I was just catching whatever. I didn't care too much about picking like the best natures and everything like that. I just wanted it to be fun. But I ended up getting the ability Forewarn, which is better than Synchronize in a playthrough in my opinion, mainly because of the fact that I obviously had no idea what the heck anything was going to use against me, and kind of having that indication of it from Forewarn was definitely useful information for me. When I went through this playthrough, I really didn't know anything about the actual campaign. Like, I just went in and knew the pokes that I liked, and maybe I would find them, but I didn't actually pay attention to like learning like what type of gyms were. Like, honestly, every time there was a new gym, I had no idea what type it was going to be until I actually got there. But Forewarn definitely helped out with move prediction and things like that. But for the moves itself that it used, it was Psybeam, Shadow Ball, Calm Mind, and Moonlight, which was a very good combination in my opinion. The only reason I have Psybeam over Psychic was because first I got lazy and just evolved it once it learned Calm Mind. And secondly, because Psybeam has a lot more PP than Psychic does, so it allows it to keep attacking, which was very useful because I would occasionally just take time to set up with Calm Mind, get like +4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, and then just attack for the rest of the time, and having the increased PP definitely helped out. Shadow Ball was there obviously because there are quite a bit of other ghost and psychic types that you run into in the game, so Shadow Ball definitely helps against super effective damage. And then Moonlight was very useful because it allowed this thing to survive even longer with or on top of its bulk that it had, which was taking hits, as I said, from a lot of different things. So MUSHARNA definitely was a key player in my team and helped live really long in battle and did a lot of damage, especially when I got the chance to set up with it. Up next, we have my Stoutland, which I thought was hilarious when I found this picture because it totally looks like Nyan Cat minus like the rainbow, and it's a dog obviously, but I thought this was like the funniest picture. And if anybody could possibly make like a Nyan Cat video with Stoutland like that, it would be like the coolest thing in the world. But anyways, Stoutland was another really good defensive Pokemon and offensive. It was probably one of the most versatile Pokemon on my team because it could take hits and it also could deal out massive damage really quickly because it does have really great attack and defenses. Plus, its ability Intimidate was one of the most valuable things on this team because of the fact that I don't have resists to Dragon, so the Dragon Gym was probably the hardest thing in the game, but Intimidate helped out so much because all of those things, like all the Axews and stuff that you run into, or whatever the heck the evolution is, they all set up like on their first turn, so having Stoutland to intimidate them prevented my team from taking a buttload of damage that it would have otherwise taken. So Intimidate was definitely one of the more valuable abilities that I've had on my team. I also got incredibly lucky with the nature because it is careful, meaning it has increased special defense but minus special attack. And since Stoutland should never be using special attack, this is great. And with increased special defense and having Intimidate as your ability, Stoutland was definitely taking hits similar to the way MUSHARNA did on this team, and it was really great. As for the moves, though, I had Strength, which was an HM, obviously, but it's also kind of the most powerful move that it would learn, because obviously I'm not going to spend time to make its Happiness super happy to give it a return and be really powerful. And I didn't really want to use Takedown because of the recoil, so Strength, even though it's 10 base power less, did the job more often than not. Up next I had Crunch because I thought that would work really well with Strength because it basically hits everything except for Steel types, which I was able to handle anyways because I put Dig on it, which, you know, is not a move to use in a competitive battle ever, but it works really great in the story mode because your opponent never switches out usually. I think there was only one instance when something switched out, but that wasn't ever going to happen again. And then lastly, I had Wild Charge on it, which was really good, even though I didn't really get to use it as much because it's one of the last TMs that you get in like the initial playthrough before the post game. So you get it right before the Elite Four, I believe, and there's really nothing in the Elite Four that's weak to Electric that I can think of aside from maybe a Jellicent or something like that. But at least that's off the top of my head. But in that case, anyways, I just had Crunch, which worked out. But it's still a really nice moveset to take on a lot of different things that you may find, and I'm finding Wild Charge to be very useful in the post game, where I'm finding like a ton of like water types and stuff like that. So Stoutland was definitely very useful as a defensive poke, but also really great as an offensive poke because it was decently fast as well, and it was dealing a lot of damage with stab, normal type moves, as well as the other moves in this set. Up next, we have probably the most unique member of my team, which was my Seismitoad, and the only reason I picked it was mainly because Seismitoad is either my first or second favorite Pokemon in 5th gen next to Bouffalant, and I just think it's the coolest thing ever. It's an awesome looking toad, and it's a mixed attacker, and it has some pretty decent defense and HP and speed. Like, it's just a very well-rounded Pokemon with really good typing. And the water ground typing helped out so much, especially in the electric gym that I fought because they couldn't really do anything to it, and I could just hammer out mud shots all day on it, except against like Pachirisu, but I could still deal with it anyways. But it was a very useful Pokemon to have when I needed to do damage to something because I always knew that it had a move that it could hit for at least neutral damage, and I needed a pretty good special attacker, which Seismitoad was probably the main special attacker on my team next to MUSHARNA. But with it, I got a Naughty Nature, which is pretty good because it increased my physical attack, and even though I only ever used one physical attack move with it, it still definitely helped it out to deal more damage. The minus special defense really didn't matter that much, so I wasn't too concerned with it, so Naughty is alright as a nature for this guy. But luckily enough, I did get the ability Poison Hand, which I was very excited about, and I kind of geared the set around the fact that I could use a couple moves to make use of it, and Poison Hand definitely helped out a lot when I needed something to die in 2 hits, and I got just shy of half, but Poison Hand activated, causing me to 2-hit KO it, which is fantastic. And I love this ability, and I haven't really used a Seismitoad in like any of the simulation battles with Poison Hand. I normally use it with like Water Absorb, even though it isn't released yet, but I normally use it with that. So I'm gonna maybe try using Poison Hand a lot more because it's such a cool ability. But as for the moves, the first one I had is Surf, obviously as its main water stab move and to allow me to surf around in the game. Then I had Grass Knot again, which was really great against other Seismitoad and its evolutions because there are quite a bit of those that I've encountered, as well as it helped deal with other water types that I would encounter that it could resist their attacks from and then also deal super effective damage back at, which is fantastic. Also, Grass Knot is a contact move despite it being special, which is very unique, so it did allow Poison Hand to activate on occasion, which was great and one of the main reasons why I picked Grass Knot. Then I had Mud Shot, which it's an okay attack move, but it's not the best thing in the world. I would normally go with Earth Power if it was like a competitive battle, but since I'm just using moves they learned in the game, Mud Shot was definitely useful. It's also really great because it automatically lowers speed, even though it isn't 100% accurate, and it would occasionally miss, which would annoy me a lot. But Mudshot speed decrease is definitely useful in the game because Seismitoad isn't the fastest thing. It is kind of fast, but it's not like the best. So whenever I could get a Mudshot off, it would be great because I would outspeed the next turn and hopefully be able to take it out. And then lastly, we have Drain Punch, which was an amazing move to have in this game because there are so many normal types that you encounter, and having a Drain Punch there to deal super effective damage, as well as recover your HP back, and also occasionally get Poison Hand to activate, is fantastic on any Seismitoad, so I would definitely recommend that if you're going to use one. And finally, the last member of my team, which was Boldore, and it wasn't a Gigalith because I didn't have anybody to trade with, so I obviously couldn't get it, but it still worked really well, even though it wasn't its final evolution. I gave it Eviolite because I knew it wasn't going to eventually evolve, which didn't really help out at all because of the fact that it has Sturdy anyways, and it was basically going down in 2 hits if it was like on the special side, which kind of sucked, but Boldore still helped out a lot, especially against a Flying Gym. And having a Rock type on your team is always amazing in playthroughs because there are so many normal types and flying types that you find and that random trainers have that you can resist, which is also really great, especially because Boldore is really one of the only rock types you ever even get in this game. The only other three, I think, are the turtle and its evolutions, the bird rock thing and its evolutions, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on names now, and Terrakion, which, I didn't even find, so I didn't even bother to find because I didn't want to use, like, any legendaries or anything like that. But having a rock type is definitely useful. Its nature kind of sucked because it has minus speed, which is always bad in a playthrough when you just want to outspeed stuff and kill stuff. And having plus special defense really doesn't help it out because it isn't a defensive Pokemon on the special side. So this increased special defense didn't really do anything for it, which was unfortunate. But one of the main reasons why I wanted to use it was because of its ability Sturdy and its new mechanics to where it acts like an automatic focus sash. So if I ever needed to switch this thing in, I always knew that it would be able to survive at least one attack and then potentially take out the opponent on the next turn, which was fantastic and was a strategy I went with often because I knew that it was basically going to work all the time because of how Sturdy works. But for the moveset, I gave it 2 rock moves, which is really uncommon, but they both don't have a lot of PP, and I didn't want to use like PP ups or whatever, so it has both Rock Blast and Rock Slide on it. What you should know though is that 3 hits of Rock Blast is equal to Rock Slide, so they basically were the same move, it was just having more of something. Rock Blast I think is more useful though, because 3 attacks equaling Rock Slide also means 3 chances to crit, which would occasionally happen, meaning that it would do way more damage than Rock Slide ever could. And also when you would get 4 or 5, you would be doing way more damage than Rock Slide could. I prefer Rock Blast if you didn't notice. But Rock Slide was also useful to be a secondary rock type attacking move. Now we had Stealth Rocks, or I put Stealth Rock on it, mainly because I knew it could learn it, so I figured why the heck not. But I didn't actually ever use it that often in the playthrough because it wasn't really something I thought about. Like normally you're not thinking about leads or setting up entry hazards when you're in just a regular in-game battle. So I would occasionally use it, but it wasn't like an important thing to have. And then Bulldoze was its last move to help out its speed a little bit because it automatically lowers speed, and because I didn't have the Earthquake TM, so Bulldoze was the ground type move that it would have. But this guy was probably one of the more clutch players on my team because I said before I could always bring it in and kill something because I knew it would survive one hit because of sturdy, which is very valuable on any team. So now lastly for this video I decided to show you guys a weaknesses and resistances chart for this team that I used. This is made using Maryland's team builder on their website. So if you just go and Google like Maryland team builder for black and white, you'll get something that will basically allow you to pick the Pokemon that you want and let you know what the Pokemon are weak to and what they also resist. So as you can see from this chart, I have a resist against everything except for Dragon, which, as I said before, was probably one of the hardest gyms, but without Stoutland I would have never gotten through it because of its ability to intimidate. But aside from being able to resist a lot of stuff, which was kind of what I was going for, it is fairly weak to a bunch of things. There are multiple 2x weaknesses, as you can see, which is where the 200% column is. But it really didn't come too much into play because you can always switch in the game when or before your opponent brings out another Pokemon if you have that turned on. I only turned it on mainly because of experience reasons, because it would often be really annoying to have it turned on and then your opponent brings out something else and you're like, darn it, I want to give something else experience. So why the heck do I have this turned on if I just want to switch out and have that, level up? So that was my reasoning behind it. I had the switch thing turned off initially, but then I realized that it would just make things way more complicated than they needed to be. So I turned it off. So the switching thing never was a problem. But we do have two good resistances to Electric and Ghost, which is Stoutland and Seismitoad. And, you know, luckily nothing was weak to Electric at all, which made that gym fairly easy to deal with. And it's just some pretty, good overall weakness and resistances that were able to deal with everything that the game could throw at me. So I was very happy with the way this turned out in this chart, and hopefully once I start Wi-Fi battles, which I hope to be doing within at least the next month, because I need to order something to allow me to plug my um, game cartridge into my computer and then use one of like the Saving or Gen programs to allow me to make the Pokemon EV'd, because I do not have the time to do that. It's because of school and everything else that's going to be going on. But hopefully, I'm just letting you guys know that battles will be coming in the future, and I cannot wait to do that because I've been wanting to do that ever since I even started this channel, because it obviously, was meant to be a competitive set channel, and a lot of you guys want to see see a lot of the sets that I use in action. A lot of the things in my analysis videos aren't really that great, and I knew that when I was making them. I was just going for something creative, so you won't necessarily see everything, and a lot of the stuff that I use is also slightly modified now from what I initially had. So you'll see some similar stuff to maybe what you're familiar with, but I hope to bring you even more like original content in the future. But that's pretty much it for now, so I hope you guys look forward to that. I'm sorry it's been a while since I posted, but that's just the way it ended up. So as always, take care and goodbye, and I hope you enjoyed this video if you felt like sitting through it. But I hope to see you guys in the future, and hopefully can get some Wi-Fi battles up. So again, take care and goodbye.